On the road, in the gym, at a coffee house. No matter where you listen, this is Prevention Perk. I'm Steve Miller with Mid-America PTTC. It's time to perk up our prevention efforts. My guest today is Shanelle Moore, who recently completed the Building Our Leadership and Diversity, BOLD, Prevention Fellowship Program, which was established to focus on increasing the number of prevention scientists working within Black African American communities. Shanelle represented the Mid-America PTTC in this process and is currently pursuing a master's degree in public health from the University of Missouri. Shanelle describes her purpose in life as being the voice for the underserved populations in the face of adversity. She was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, and since relocating to Columbia, Missouri, she's developed a love for helping people and found that to be her area of passion. Well, hello, Shanelle, and welcome to Prevention Perk.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited to have this sit-down conversation with you. We've had a little bit of experience since you've been going through the BOLD Fellowship Program. You worked primarily through the Missouri University and with Joan Masters as your supervisor. But it's been nice to have the conversations that we've had, and I've heard a lot about your process through conversation with Joan. Yes. But I'd like to unpack it so that the audience hears about it, because I think, if the opportunity had been available for me, that would have been a great opportunity to go through when I was a college student. Awesome. So I'm hoping that it was a great and valuable experience for you. My first question always is how did you get interested in prevention? And for you, what was it that made you think, well, this would be a great experience for Shanelle Moore to participate in?
Yes, thank you. So it was a long journey, but to sum it all up, I got interested into prevention by working in the intervention field. I did a lot of work in intervention where I was working specifically in organizations that provided services to people after they have already went through something. And it was a lot of reactionary things. And my mind continued to think about, well, how can we prevent this? How can we prevent this? I took a break from social work, the social work field, social services field, and I went into nursing. Nursing is really what kind of fostered it more, because I took a public health course, and doing public health, it really opened my eyes to have that bird's eye view on situations instead of being the ant in the situation where I'm on the ground actually in it. So having that bird's eye view and being able to look at situations and public health issues from the bird's eye level allowed me to be able to think outside the box. I've always been a big thinker, a critical thinker, a strategist. I've always done those type of things. So it just fell in line with how I already thought. And it was just a skill that I had, and it felt like a perfect fit. So I dropped out of nursing school because I continued to migrate back to, well, how can I prevent getting people into the hospital? I don't want to provide the care. I know I can, but how do I prevent them from going to the hospital in the first place? So I dropped out of nursing school and I enrolled in the public health program here in Columbia, Missouri, and everything just literally started falling in line. I went through an applied epidemiology course, and my favorite saying is, why don't we go upstream? We got all these kids falling down the stream and everybody's just trying to rescue the kids. And I'm going to be the only one that's like, okay, let me mosey up the stream to figure out what's making them even fall in here in the first place. And I had an instructor tell that story. And ever since she told that story, Lynelle Phillips, ever since I told that story, it stuck with me. And that's just how I operate. Let's go upstream to figure out the issue. So when I saw this come through my email, it was like a no-brainer to me, because I am very passionate about bringing prevention work into the Black and African American community, because a lot of times those are the communities that get counted out. And I saw it firsthand by being a Black and African American woman. I saw it firsthand. So having this, by it literally just being a fellowship to bring prevention work into the Black and African American communities, it was like a no-brainer for me. And I really felt like it would give me the experience that I was wanting to bring prevention into these communities.
That's great. I listening to your story, I was thinking, I always ask that same question. And a lot of times people say, well, I just kind of fell into it. It was a job opportunity and I really fell in love with it once I got here. But listening to you describe that was a lot like I worked in a treatment setting. And I used to think, well, what's going on before this? I didn't know anything about prevention per se. So it's nice to hear that there are other people out there that are thinking, well, what's further upstream so that we can kind of slow the roll on what's happening here? Because there's plenty of problem. It just seems like there could be a little bit more emphasis on what could be preventing some of those issues. So,
yes.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. The funder of this project, along with all the other products of the Mid-America PTTC, is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Although funded by SAMHSA, the content of this recording does not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA. The mission of the African American Behavioral Health Center of Excellence is to address the need for greater equity and effectiveness in behavioral health services for African Americans. The center is determined to help transform behavioral health services for African Americans. Their web link is in the show notes, or visit africanamericanbehavioralhealth.org. Well, tell us a little bit about the Bold Fellowship itself. So what is that for the audience that's listening, and kind of, maybe what your experience through that fellowship was like?
Yeah, so the fellowship was an opportunity for the Black fellows to be able, from around the world. So it was from different areas. We had someone from Rhode Island, people from DC, people from it was all around. And we all came together and did a project on developing an inventory on the prevention program specifically towards opioids. So what we wanted to look at was the availability of these prevention programs that specifically was for opioid use, and then zoom in to see if there were programs specifically for the Black and African American community. So in that process, we did a lot of literature reviews. We put a lot of data together to actually develop this inventory to show that this is a need, and what needs to be done to address the opioid crisis, because there was a document that was published by SAMHSA regarding the Black and African American opioid crisis that is in America right now. A lot of people don't know about it, but it is an article that is published out there. And it's specifically focusing on the Black and African American community. So by us doing this inventory, it showed the lack of prevention programs that are specifically geared towards the Black and African American communities, to where it can help get out of this opioid crisis.
Was there something about the experience as you went through it that really that kind of was like you really learned about prevention itself? I know you talked about being interested in prevention and how you could, prevent people from ending up in the hospital. But as far as the opioid crisis or just substance use prevention itself, what are some of the things that maybe you learned as a result of your process with the fellowship?
Yeah, so we were offered a lot of opportunities for training. The one that really stuck with me the most was the training that we had in Los Angeles, California. It was the NCL core competencies training, and it was specifically talking about the prevention framework. So how the prevention framework cycle operates, how evidence-based programs are developed, how promising programs are developed, how evidence-informed programs are developed. So really going through that training is really something that was very, very meaningful and impactful for me. The training was I think I was there for a week. So it was a very intense training. We focused on how programs are developed using risk factors and protective factors. And then conversations came up a lot that involved the cultural aspect of things. Because a lot of times when you're in prevention work, sometimes you look at things from the lens of just prevention and forget to include the cultural side of things, where we may look at something as a risk factor, but it could be a protective factor for that specific family. So just making sure that as prevention specialists or scientists, that we are operating out of a lens of cultural humility so that we're able to develop these programs that are evidence-based and promising programs so that they can be implemented in these communities.
So you mentioned, you went and you did the cultural competencies. So were you surprised by the SPIF model? Was that something that was new to you? Did you not know about strategic prevention framework before this?
Yes, it was new to me. I did not know about it. I always knew that you had to do an assessment first because of my social services side of things. I know we have to do an assessment first, and then we just give the solution to the problem. So it wasn't, I did not know about the model and even the ethics that were in it. It was surprising to see how closely related a lot of the social services is to prevention, to nursing. There's a lot of ethics that kind of cross the board, flow across the board.
Yeah. So I would imagine now you can see where the SPIF model could be applicable in a lot of different, disciplines, not just prevention, because you talked about working in the nursing field and social services. So it's applicable across the board. So pretty powerful tool for you to be able to walk away with that knowledge. Yeah. That's good.
Yes.
Was there anything about this process, the fellowship, that really kind of surprised you? Like you came in kind of having maybe a little bit of an understanding of what you were going to do, but then as you got into it, you're like, well, this really surprises me that this is the way things are in substance use prevention.
One thing that really stuck out to me was how in prevention work, you have to you have to always be aware of your biases. Because your own experiences can influence the decisions that you may make. So you may have unconscious bias, everyone does, that can influence the decisions and the choices that you're making, whether it's you're doing research, whether it's you're analyzing the data from a specific area. So really having to put on this hat of an objective view, rather than saying, okay, this is my own feelings and my own interpretations. It's more about, okay, let me take the objective view, the bird's eye view, and be able to give the prevention advice or prevention guidance on what is the best way to do something. Even if it does not, there may be things out there that don't work. Like, for example, one tool that I learned that is not effective, if you look at evidence, is having celebrities or high-standing people be the face of a prevention project. Doing those type of things, like sometimes that's done in communities and it's effective. So to hear that that's not really a evidence-based tool or one that's proven to work, it was kind of surprising to me. One that like was like, oh yeah, that's a no-brainer, but I never had thought about it was like when they set cars on fire and it's like a scare tactic, or the car accident models. It's a scare for that moment, but it does not have a lasting effect that they're trying to get. So those are some of the major things.
So in that line of thinking, I mean, when you talk about having some of that unconscious bias, I mean, are you? I don't know that I have the answer. I'm just wondering what your thoughts on it might be. It's kind of like how do you do your due diligence and say, I don't know if I am seeing this correctly. Is that part of the collaborative experience that you went through? I mean, what are your thoughts on how you kind of check yourself in that regard?
One thing that I take with myself is nothing for the people without the people.
Right.
So the way you can check yourself is in your process, you are including the people that you're writing this program for, which goes to the collaborative part that you were just discussing. And this could be collaborations with people who are other prevention workers. This could be with people that are on the treatment side of things. This could be with the community members, but nothing for the people without the people. When we come in and try to have the savior mentality, then it could be less informed or less relevant for that group of people. Another area I would say is just also understanding what cultural humility really is. Because a lot of times when we hear the word culture, we just think of race. And cultural humility is a culture in general. It's practices, values, beliefs in any group. That is everything. It could, like, there's a prevention culture, there is a social services culture, there are cultures in so many different things. And to have cultural humility is to understand that even though you're informed on a specific culture, you don't know everything, and that things can change. So having that humility to understand that things can change will allow you to be more flexible and adaptive with your work.
Wow, that's great. That's a great bit of wisdom to share. I appreciate that. Yes. I think it's my understanding too that when you went through this process, you worked on different campuses in the state of Missouri. Some of them, I would say, a smaller campus and a larger campus. So through that lens, I mean, did you find that prevention was prevention, or the need on those campuses was the same, or was the approach different? How did you go about addressing some of the work that you did, but more importantly, what are some of the things that maybe you learned that stood out as a result of being on two varied sizes of campus?
So the biggest thing that I would say that was a challenge, or like an eye-opening moment for me, was the issues are the same, but the way that they are handled are different based on the sense of belonging on the campus. So if there's a sense of belonging on one campus and not a sense of belonging on the other, there will be more instances where there will be pushback on a bystander intervention program or an engaged program being implemented because of the fear that may come from it being engaged. And then also understanding that a lot of times when you don't feel support from the top down, people tend to go into a self-preservation mode where they want to worry about themselves and just get themselves through, because worrying about someone else adds additional stress to them.
Right.
That was one major takeaway that I would say was similar for both campuses. Just on the larger campus, it was not as seen because it was a smaller group. And what was the second part of your question?
Well, I think you're delving into kind of what I'm getting at. So you're if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is feeling that sense of connection. And are you talking about the student body as a whole, or are you talking about maybe different minority populations as a part of the campus? I mean, is it really just, and then you said, the top down approach, whether or not it's being taken serious, is it really just about going to a campus and being able to say, this is, to be effective, you really have to have the student all the way up to administration involved in this with some understanding of the importance of implementing prevention on this particular campus or within this particular community?
Yes,
it's not size, it's just how are you able to unpack the idea of prevention?
Yes, and whatever you are asking them to do, they feel supported.
Right. And you, by they, you mean the student body, or yes, they feel like they're being heard or they're understood, or
yes.
And if you're asking them questions, kind of follow through on, maybe some of the research that you find out about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're really trying to just, it's really about building a conversation the whole time. You're really having to collaborate with everyone that's involved just to just to really find out what's going on and then be effective in addressing risk factors.
Yes, that's exactly the reason why I was enthusiastic about the Engage program, was because the model is facilitated discussions. I love facilitated discussions. When you have the skill to facilitate a discussion and get the people talking, you can hear the true issues. So again, it goes back to nothing for the people without the people.
Right.
So hearing their sides of things and even going even deeper in focus groups, because the conversations and the things that come up during these facilitated discussions can't be talked about so in depth. And that's when you can branch out into these focus groups and you can go more in detail. But we also Engage also had the deeper dive sessions. So having those deeper dive sessions allowed you to go into that specific topic.
Having had that experience, this just came into mind, and I just wonder, because I guess I could say you're kind of close to the source now. You've had an opportunity to visit on different campuses. Was there something through this process when you're engaging with the student body? Was there something that came out that you were like, well, now that really surprises me? I mean, we talk about there's an opioid issue. There's also other, risk factors inherent in being on a campus, mixed genders and all kinds of things that go on. And then you have substances. Was there something that kind of stood out maybe on both those campuses? And you're like, wow, I'm really surprised to learn this from today's college student. Was there a conversation that you were having and it was like, I didn't expect this to be a conversation that would come out of this process?
Yes. So yes, it definitely was. The conversation that continued to show up multiple times was students did not want to be engaged community members. They wanted to be engaged.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that they weren't ever being engaged. They were not afraid to be engaged. Now, there was a couple because of safety, but with the correct tools, they were not reluctant to being engaged and involving themselves in situations that the bystander intervention is trying to address. But really, what really surprised me was how a lot of them literally go into self-preservation because they are being engaged community members, but then their mental health and their well-being is not protected by them being engaged community members. So then they go into a self-preservation mode. So how can we prevent that from happening if we want to have a community of engaged community members? If we want them people to be engaged, you have people that are willing to be engaged. But if they're saying that they are not feeling supported or protected mentally or physically, they begin to feel like they are in danger. What are we going to do to protect the actual engaged community member so that we continue this engaged community?
Wow.
We can't just protect the person that is on the other side of things. We have to protect the engaged community member as well.
Right. So did it surprise you to find out that the student body did want to be that engaged? I mean,
Yes.
that was news to you? Yeah,
Yes.
that's really kind of cool.
Yeah.
So then it's again about building in those practices or that environment where they feel safe to continue to speak out or speak up on
Yes.
behalf of others without fear of, retribution or, because
Retaliation.
retaliation. Yeah, because they're identifying a need. How do you navigate that? And I see where we're going full circle with kind of your experience. How do we then, as the prevention field, help to foster that? Because prevention is more than just finding the problem and trying to address it. It's about how do you foster this all the way through all stages of the strategic prevention framework, so that there's some success that builds then upon that success and moves it forward.
Yes, sustainability. Wow. That's a huge goal that I think prevention should be focused on, is how not just preventing things, but how do you prevent and then make that prevention sustainable?
Yeah. Yeah. How do you keep moving it forward? Otherwise you're just kind of going around in circle addressing underage drinking. That just came to mind, but we need to move the needle a little bit further. And that's that capacity to not only sustain it financially, but how do you sustain it infrastructure wise, with people that want to come to the table and a myriad of other conversations that need to be had, and leadership and all of that goes along with it for it to have a future. You're listening to Prevention Perk. The Bold Fellowship Program was developed to build capacity within Black African American communities. There are links in the show notes to introduce you to each of the Bold Fellows across the PTTC network and to showcase the work done by our guest during her fellowship with Missouri Partners in Prevention on behalf of the Mid-America PTTC. I'm curious. I know when I had talked to Joan, she had said that you had developed like a storyboard of your process, and it's my understanding that once that's complete, we'll have it someplace on a website, and I'll make a link to that so that those that are listening will be able to view it. But can you kind of walk us through this storyboard that you did? Maybe just describe what it is, and if I click on it and I go see it, what's that gonna help me understand?
Yeah, so it's called The Experience of a Prevention Fellow in Higher Education Prevention, and it discusses implementation of prevention programming on 2 campuses. So at the top, it gives just the overview of the Bold Fellowship and a little bit about me. And then it goes into what my site that I was assigned to, so Missouri Partners in Prevention, and then it gives an overview of the Engage program. And the Engage program is a violence prevention program that is implemented on campuses specifically for bystander education. So in this storyboard, it talks about the 2 different experiences that I had implementing the Engaging program on 2 different campuses here. One campus was a larger campus, which was predominantly white, and the other campus was a smaller campus, which was a HBCU campus. And it discussed the implementation of the program and some of the issues that arose as the program was being implemented. It also provides some of the feedback that was directly from the students during those facilitated discussions, and then my overall takeaways from both of those campuses. So just to sum up a couple of them, prevention programs, they can be implemented, but with cultural relevant and aware staff so that it is applicable to the appropriate groups of people. And then awareness of prevention work is needed to help implement a prevention program. So this is where those skills trainings come in, because you can't implement something that you're not aware of. So just making sure that you have that. But then the last one that is really huge to me is to have an engaged community. There needs to be trust and relationships built between staff, faculty, administration, and students.
So as you're going through that, I'm thinking a storyboard is kind of like a podcast conversation, only in written and visual depiction. So
yeah,
that's fantastic. Well, I can't wait to see it. Like I said, we'll make sure we add a link so people can go directly to it and see the work that you were able to accomplish. I do have another question I want to ask you before we go, and this is an opportunity for you to be the expert. You're the sage on the stage. What's something we didn't talk about, or maybe from your experience, like if there was one thing that the audience really needs to know about from Shanelle's perspective, what is that?
The piece of advice and wisdom that I would provide is to do prevention. Ensure you are involving everyone in that process. It is not a lonesome field. It has to be done with a team. But as I said earlier, nothing for the people without the people.
It's not a lonesome field. I really like that. That's fantastic.
Yes.
Shanelle, it's been a real pleasure to visit with you, and I'm glad to hear that your experience in the Bold Fellowship program was beneficial. I hope that it has legs for you in the future, and you're able to take it somewhere and make it your own as you go forward.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to Prevention Perk, a podcast from Mid-America PTTC. To learn more about our innovations, visit pttcnetwork.org and look under your PTTC for the Mid-America link. Remember, prevention is better together, and together we are stronger.